This is Matt from Rock Solid Audio, and in this video we're going to show you how to configure Control Hub to work with Control Strip 2, and we're going to show you all the features and functions and how to use them. The first thing we're going to do is download the software. So navigate to our website and single click here on the banner and it will direct you to the product page. Then you can click on Downloads and download the appropriate app for your operating system. Then unzip. And I'm going to stick this in the Applications folder. When we open the application, the first thing that we're going to see is this pop-up message. Follow the instructions and open System Preferences. Unlock with your password. And the first thing we're going to do is uninstall any applications that we no longer need. This mouse mode application is no longer needed. We're then going to add Control Hub. If you're on Big Sur, you can also add Control Hub to screen recordings. This will allow Control Hub to determine which plugin you have open. If you're on Mojave or Catalina, you might not have this option, but it will present itself when the application needs. And if you're on Windows, you don't need to follow these steps. When we first open our application, we'll be presented by these three tabs: a Midi Settings tab, a Mouse Settings tab, and a Preset Exchange tab. The Midi Settings tab will be where we find all the elements required in order to use our Control Strip 2 as a MIDI controller. Our Mouse Settings tab will be where we find all the elements in order to use our Control Strip 2 as a mouse. And our Preset Exchange tab will be where we find presets for the Mouse Settings tab. The first thing we're going to do when we open our Midi Settings tab is add a new preset. As you can see, this has now populated our Midi Settings tab with some elements that we can change. Let's go into more detail about what each of these elements does. These columns indicate the control names of our Control Strip 2. The encoder CC and button CC columns are where you can change the MIDI values of each element of your Control Strip 2. The sensitivity column is where we can change the sensitivity of all of our encoders on our Control Strip 2. Down here, we have the MIDI channel selector, where you can decide which channel you would like your Control Strip 2 to be on. In the User Presets section, we have three buttons: an Add New button, which we already showed you, an R button, which stands for Recall, and a D button, which stands for Delete. When you have more than one preset, you can change through these by pushing Recall. If we select User Preset 2 and hit Recall, it will send this data to our Control Strip 2. If there's a preset in here that we didn't like, we could always select it and push Delete. Populating the information in our Midi Settings tab is very simple. We just simply assign a number to each one of these encoder CCs and button CCs, like this. sensitivity value of 1 is a good starting point, but you might find you need to increase this depending on which door you're using. Now that we've populated all of our MIDI values with a different number, each one will show up as an individual element inside whichever door you're using. Once this has been completed, you can close Control Hub because it's not needed in order to run MIDI mode. The only time you'll need the program is if you'd like to change between different presets, or change an individual element of a preset. It's also worth noting that your Control Strip 2 will remember these settings even when you unplug it, so you don't need to keep recalling these settings every time you change your computer or take your controller somewhere else. The first thing that we need to do when we open up the Mouse Settings tab is add a preset folder. The good thing about Control Hub is you can add different preset folders, so if you operate in more than one door, you can have presets for each door. So let's do that now. Click Add. Name your folder. If you have more than one door, you can just add another. Now that we have two preset folders, depending on which one is selected, will depend on where our presets get downloaded to. Let's go and download some presets. Okay, so here we are in our Preset Exchange folder, where you can find all of the presets that you can currently download. Once you've selected a preset, push Install. We're going to download a few. If a preset doesn't exist that you would like, you can just request a preset here. It will open up your default mailing client and you can email us from there. Now that we've downloaded some presets, you can see that they've appeared in the folder that we had selected before, in our Pro Tools folder. Notice how our Cubase folder is still empty. Let's select a preset. Now, our mouse tab has been populated with the preset that was selected. If you're ever in doubt about which preset you've selected, it will appear here. Underneath the preset name, you'll see three buttons: a Configure button, an R button that stands for Reset, and a D button that stands for Delete. Pushing the Reset button will reset the configuration step, which we're about to show you in a few minutes. The Delete button will completely delete the preset. If you ever have any issues with the preset, we would highly recommend that you delete it and reinstall it. You can do that like this. Then you can navigate back and reinstall. This is like factory resetting the mouse map. The first thing that we should do when configuring a preset is to check the plugin scale. So let's navigate to our plugin and see what the scale is. You can see that it's 100%. And our plugin scale on our Control Hub app is also 100%. So we're good to go. If your plugin doesn't have a scale, then this setting should just be at 100%. Next, we're going to click Configure. The instruction tells us to click and hold on the center of the HF gain. navigate to your plugin, click and hold for about half a second, and let go. You should now see that our configuration box has changed to say mapped, and that configuration has been successful. Let's check to see if it worked. You can see that our mapping was successful. If we wanted to map our preset at a different scale, it's very easy. Let's reset. And change our plugin to 75%. We simply mimic that scale here. Now we configure again. Click the configure button. The instruction tells us to click and hold on the center of the HF gain knob. Let's navigate to our plugin and do that. As you can see, mapping was successful. Let's check if it's worked. You can customize the maps just as easily as we configured it earlier. Let's have a look and see what all the controls do. You can see that the input knob is currently controlling the in gain, but I'd like to change that. I'd like it to control the V gain instead. So let's navigate to Control Hub, and we're going to reset that specific control. Then we're going to click on the Configure button, and we'll be presented with a message. Click and hold on the center of the control required. Let's navigate to our plugin and click on the new one. You can see that it now says mapped. And if we check, we now have control of the V gain instead. This can be done on any encoder in Control Hub. If we look at the encoder function row here, you can see that we're presented with 7 options. The first one is a non-option. If you select this, Control Hub will ignore that control. The next 2 are linear and linear inverted. Linear is the one we're currently using, and it is basically exactly the same as if you were controlling the mouse with your hand. Linear inverted would reverse these options, so if you turn the control clockwise, the knob would move anti-clockwise. Circular and circular inverted are next. Some older plugins employ a circular motion in order to control them. If you have one of these, and they're quite rare these days, you can use these 2 options. The last is scroll. If you select this, the controls will be controlled by the scroll wheel rather than a mouse motion of up and down or circular. Let's customize some of the buttons now. Let's scroll down and go and see what Custom 1 and Custom 2 do. Custom 1 changes the dynamic on, and Custom 2 changes the EQ on. But I want to change those. So let's reset them and configure. Custom 1 first. Click and hold for half a second. And now it's mapped. And Custom 2. You can see that they're now both mapped. And I now have control of the dynamics to E and the equalizer to dynamic sidechain. Similarly, you can change the function of the buttons as well. you have a choice of 4. A non-option, similar to the encoder function, where the control hub will just ignore that. A single click, a double click, and a default click. We're going to focus on the default click now, because the other two are fairly self-explanatory. As you can see, the HF gain has a default click for the button, which means it will now function exactly the same as if I default clicked on a specific element of the plugin. Inside this plugin, option click is default. So let's navigate now down to where it says default keystroke, and we're going to input option. And now if we navigate back to the plugin and click in our HF gain knob, it will default click. Likewise, all the other controls that have that will do the same. There's also an option for a fine keystroke. For this specific plugin in Pro Tools, the fine command is command. So let's select that. Underneath you can see that it says fine at percentage. This is the percentage in which the fine command will engage. At the moment we have it at 20%. So if I move the encoder less than 20% velocity, it will engage. You can change this to however you want. For instance, if you put it on 100%, the fine command will be engaged all the time. Similarly, if I put it on 0, it would never be engaged. At the very top, we have a minimum velocity and a maximum velocity. Depending on how big your screen is and how fast you have your tracking speed of your specific OS, you might need to change these. But this is a good starting point. If you have a 4K screen, you might find that you've turned your tracking speed up, and you might find that you need to change the values here. But generally, this is a good starting point. Let's map one more plugin. This Mix Hub plugin has the words Dynamic EQ Insert written after it. And this is important, because if we navigate to this plugin, you'll notice that we are able to change the elements of the GUI around and put it in different orders. For plugins like this, and there are a few, you might have to map the plugin more than once if you want to use it in different formations. Right now we have it in Dynamic EQ Insert, and that's how we're going to map it. Our Mix Hub preset here says Dynamic EQ Insert. So let's configure. The plugin scale is 100%. And our plugin is at 100%. So let's click configure, and it gives us an instruction. Click and hold on the center of the HF gain. Let's navigate to the plugin. Click and hold for half a second. Now it says mapped. But let's just say that we wanted both options, Dynamic EQ Insert and EQ Dynamic Insert. Let's navigate back to the preset exchange. Select Mix Hub, and you can see that we have two options. So let's click the other one. Let's navigate to the plugin and swap it round. And now let's configure. First, let's check the plugin scale, 100%. And our plugin is also 100%, so we're good to go. Just click configure. The instruction tells us. Let's click and hold. It's now mapped in both ways, and even if you change it like this, it will instantly change to the other mapping. At this point, we just want to reiterate that before you do anything with customizing your preset, you should always map. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about resetting and deleting. Earlier, we customized this BX Console plugin. We changed the input knob from controlling the in gain to controlling the V gain. And we don't want to lose that mapping. But let's just say that I wanted to change the scale of my plugin without losing the mapping. We can do that with the reset button. Let's change it back to 75%. Select our plugin, hit reset. And now we can change the scale down and remap. We should still have all of our customized maps, but we've changed the scale. Let's say we want to start again. That's when we use the delete button. If we delete this map, we'll lose all of the customization and we'll have to reinstall. In Control Hub, you can now control MIDI mode and mouse mode simultaneously. An example of this we'll demonstrate in Cubase. We've configured this preset and it's currently selected. And if we start moving, you can see that we're controlling the preset. But if we click off the preset and back to our DAW, it's now set up in order for me to control the volume of the selected fader and the pan and even the mute and solo. If I go back to selecting the plugin, it will change to controlling the plugin. Similarly, if I click off, it'll go back to controlling the DAW elements. If you have a DAW that's capable of MIDI mapping, for instance Cubase, Reaper, Pro Logic, then you can implement this and take full advantage of the fact that MIDI mode and mouse mode now work simultaneously. That concludes our demonstration of Control Hub and how to use it with Control Strip 2. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email us and we'll try and answer the questions as quick as possible. We hope you enjoy Control Hub and happy mixing.